Hey everyone, my name is Wedge and welcome to the Mana Source Tournament Report. We had a couple big standard events this past weekend. Namely, there was a standard Grand Prix in Louisville, Kentucky, and a Star City Open in Seattle, Washington. We're definitely seeing the effects of last weekend's Pro Tour on the metagame. By this, of course, we mean that devotion decks, Esper control, and green-red aggro variations were the order of the day. Here are the details. Let's get to it. Brian Braunduin reigned victorious at the Grand Prix, running one of three mono-black devotion decks we saw this weekend. In his build, we saw the deck take even more of a turn toward mid-range with only 15 creatures. Of those creatures, only one was Erebos, and we saw drop to only 2 Pack Rat. But Great Merchant of Asphodel is as big a card as ever, especially when the only 2 non-removal spells are Underworld Connections and Whip of Erebos. And those other removal spells, numbering 10 in total, doesn't hurt either. Interestingly, this list also included 2 Temple of Deceit, exclusively for the Scry effect. The other 2 Black Devotion decks we saw over the weekend were card for card identical, with the exception that they swapped out one of 4 Mutavaults for a Nykthos Shrine to Nyx. Our other tournament victor this weekend was Jesse Hampton in the Star City Games Open with a deck we haven't seen much of since rotation, Blue-White Control. The deck looks pretty much like what you'd expect a Blue-White Control deck to be right now. Playsets of Jace Architect of Thought, Supreme Verdict, and Sphinx's Revelation set the stage. The deck included 1 Quicken, presumably because the idea of dropping a Supreme Verdict on your opponent's turn is hilarious. A single Aetherling provided the only likely win condition in the deck. That is, it's certainly a better shot than swinging for lethal with 2 Mutavaults, or picking up something nasty with Jace's Ultimate. Our Grand Prix runner-up was John Stern, with a deck he called Red-Green Beats. Appropriately, it looks a lot like Mono-Green Aggro, with some very worthy red cards occupying some slots in the list. Stormbreath Dragon, Mizium Mortars, Domri Raid, and Xenagos the Reveler all find a place in this list. The green fatties include Pelucranos World Eater and potentially a couple main deck Mistcutter Hydras. Flashing in Boon Satyr for a quick boost also becomes viable higher on the curve. The other decks we saw over the weekend in those colors were in the Star City Open. They were built similarly but added in Nylea God of the Hunt and called themselves Green-Red Devotion. Red is there for 2 reasons, Domri Raid and Xenagos. Additionally, one of the decks ran a single Mizium Mortars. Mana Acceleration got more emphasis in these decks, with Elvish Mystic, Sylvan Caryatid, and Voyaging Satyr all present. Arbor Colossus also made an appearance, boosting the deck's devotion count to increase the odds of an online Nylea ready to lay down a beating. Second place in the Star City Open went to David Dobern, running white-black mid-range. His list was pretty much what we've come to expect from the archetype, though it did skip out on Blood Baron of Vizkopa. Soldier of the Pantheon and Precinct Captain also gave the deck a surprisingly low creature curve. Don't be fooled though. With the removal package supplemented by Banisher Priest and a playset of Thoughtseize, the deck can definitely take the control route as far as it needs to. The other mid-range build in those colors in the SCG Open was very different. It kept one Blood Baron around and threw in odd choices like Lifebane Zombie and High Priest of Penance. This, along with Underworld Connections, helped fuel a playset of Great Merchant of Asphodel. All in all, the deck is a little more like a Black Devotion deck with the white splashed in for Blood Baron and Obsidat. The black-green mid-range deck that made top 8 at the Star City Open was also very much like Black Devotion. It even ran Nightveil Spectre. Its only green cards were Reaper of the Wilds, Scavenging Ooze, and Abrupt Decay. This was also the only mid-range deck we saw running less than a playset of Desecration Demon. Naturally, after its big run at the Pro Tour last weekend, Mono Blue Devotion was back and ready to take on Standard again. These decks were pretty familiar, varying primarily in number of cards like Judge's Familiar and Omen Speaker. Of course, Master of Waves and Thassa God of the Sea are the big win conditions. The decks in the Grand Prix also added Rapid Hybridization in an interesting move. A 3/3 is probably less threatening than whenever it just replaced. That also makes an overloaded Cyclonic Rift into that much harder of a kill spell. Hybridization is also a nice permanent upgrade for a 2/1 elemental token in a pinch. All 3 of this weekend's decks also ran Nykthos, where most of last weekend's decks deemed it unnecessary. The other 3 spots in the weekend's top 8s were taken by Esper Control. In the Grand Prix, we saw little out of the ordinary. Aetherling and Elspeth Sun's Champion as win conditions, Supreme Verdict supplementing various spot removal, and Sphinx's Revelation and Jace as key inclusions. Interestingly, the Esper Control deck in the Star City Open also added a single Obsidian Ghost Council as an alternate win con. Also worth noting is that no Esper deck this weekend ran more than 3 counters. Most countering was done via Dissolve, with Syncopate also seeing very slight usage. That wraps up this weekend in Standard. The archetypes that have been emerging over the past few weeks are certainly living up to the potential they showed. At the same time, there isn't really a clear winner among them. Every week we see the balance of power shift a bit, and we like that. Though it is always fun to have a crazy new deck come out of the woodwork and win a big event. Next weekend, we don't have a Standard Grand Prix, but there is a Star City Open in Indianapolis. That event also includes the Star City Invitational, and since there are standard segments to that, we'll try to grab some decks from that as well. So we'll be back this time next week with that info. As always, subscribe below for the latest and most reliable Magic the Gathering information you could ever need. This is the Mana Source. I'm Wedge. Thanks for watching, and we'll see you next time.